Wall Street opening lower today after the vote in Greece rejecting conditions for a financial bailout.
Maybe it is the political reasons, but I don't know what. I'm not so. I really am not interested in the hypothesis why this is happening. I know what is happening, and this is really hard.
Greece has undertaken a burden that is disproportionate.
In the camp, they were more concerned about actually moving to this camp. I'll just step out a shot to give you an idea of the scale of it. Most of the people, around 9,000 people.
Living in Greece has become nearly impossible for the average person. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in central Athens, anywhere from 550 euros to 700 euros, and that's before groceries, transport, or electricity. With monthly wages stuck around 1,000 euros, most people are barely hanging on. Greece may look like paradise on Instagram, but for the people who live here, it's become unaffordable, unstable, and unsustainable. In today's video, we will discuss how Greece became too expensive for its own citizens, and surprisingly, it didn't start with tourism, but something much bigger.
Greece is under pressure to do more to stem the flow of migrants to northern Europe.
For tourists, Greece is a dream. For the locals living there, it's become a battle to stay afloat. Why is that? Let's start with the basics. Property prices have skyrocketed. In Athens, home prices have jumped by over 60% since 2018. Despite this surge, wages haven't kept up. The average monthly income ranges between 950 euros and 1,100 euros, making Greece one of the lowest earning countries in the EU. In major cities, low-income renters spend 60 to 80% of their income on rent. And it's not just rent. Utility bills, groceries, fuel, and the general cost of living have all gone up. On top of all that, tourism and immigration have reshaped entire neighborhoods as Airbnb dominates the housing market, pushing out long-term tenants. Some buildings now exist entirely for short-term stays, pushing out locals who can't find a place to live in their own cities. Since 2009, over 500,000 young and educated Greeks have left the country in search of better living conditions. All of this isn't just a housing issue. It's part of a deeper issue rooted in decades of debt, policy failures, and a system that left its people behind. And that's where we begin.
They say a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Have Europeans made the most of this one? Another last chance summit to save Greece underway, and according to who you believe, it's also a summit to save the euro.
After the fall of the dictatorship in 1974, Greece wanted to rebuild fast, so the government started spending big. More pensions, more public jobs, more social programs. It felt like progress. But here's the catch. Most of it was funded by debt. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Greece borrowed loans like there was no tomorrow. The rich dodged taxes. The state kept borrowing. Everyone looked the other way. Debt kept piling up through the 1990s until a major turning point arrived in 2001 when Greece joined the Eurozone, gaining access to low-interest European credit. For a few years, everything looked fine. Investors were confident, borrowing was cheap, and the economy was booming. But it was all built on shaky ground. When the 2008 global financial crisis struck, the same Eurozone became a cage. Unlike countries with their own currencies, Greece couldn't print money, adjust interest rates, or devalue its way out of trouble. Ultimately, it lost control of its own money, and suddenly Greece's massive debt, over 100% of GDP, became unpayable. The country that had borrowed to build its future could no longer afford its present. With no way to fix the economy internally, Greece was forced to look outward, and it came at a heavy cost. In 2010, Greece received its first international bailout worth 110 billion euros from the EU and the IMF. But it wasn't free money. It came with strict conditions, mainly austerity. Pensions were slashed by as much as 40%. Thousands of government employees lost their jobs, with over 150,000 lost between 2010 and 2015. Public hospitals ran out of basic medicine. In some schools, children shared worn-out textbooks because the state couldn't afford new ones. Healthcare and education funding collapsed, and everyday life became harder. By 2013, Unemployment hit 27% and youth unemployment crossed 60%. University graduates were delivering food or leaving the country altogether. 1 in 4 people had no job, and many who did worked for wages that barely covered food. But that wasn't the only bargain. The austerity deals also demanded the privatization of key state assets. The port of Piraeus, once a symbol of Greek trade, was sold to China's Costco. 14 regional airports, including ones on tourist-heavy islands like Mykonos and Santorini, were leased to a German company for 40 years. Even state power companies and railways were sold off. In response, Athens became a city in protest, with tens of thousands marching, shouting, and striking between 2011 and 2013. The world saw this as a rescue. But for many Greeks, it felt like surrender. After the harsh bailout, Greece needed a fast way to bring in cash, and tourism became that lifeline. From island sunsets to ancient ruins, Greece used it all to market itself to the world. And it worked. Tourism boomed from 15 million visitors in 2010 to over 31 million by 2019. That's nearly 3 tourists for every Greek citizen. The money poured in. Tourism became 18 to 20% of GDP, one of the highest rates in Europe. It kept the economy afloat when nothing else could. But with tourism came the concept of short-term rentals like Airbnb. Locals saw this as an opportunity, renting out a spare room and making ends meet. But soon, investors stepped in. In some central neighborhoods, short-term rentals outnumbered traditional apartments and even hotel rooms. Neighborhoods like Koukaki, Exarchia, and Siri turned into tourist villages. By 2024, over 60% of available rentals in some areas were short-term listings. Landlords evicted long-term tenants to make way for tourists. Students, workers, and young families suddenly found themselves priced out of their own neighborhoods. A one-bedroom flat that once cost 500 euros now goes for 800 to 900 euros. Meanwhile, wages still stuck around 950 to 1,100 euros. For many Greeks, rent swallows nearly their entire paycheck. What were once living communities became tourist zones, local bakeries closed, schools lost students, cafes became cocktail bars, and local grocers became souvenir shops. Greece leaned on tourism to heal, but in this process, it accidentally made life harder for the very people it was trying to help.
Greece has witnessed a remarkable 37% surge in property purchases by Indian investors between July and August. This flurry of activity is driven by Indian buyers eager to secure permanent residency under Greece's Golden Visa program before, of course, significant regulatory changes took effect on September the 1st.
And then came the Golden Visa, a policy that made things even worse. The offer was simple: invest 250,000 euros in property and you get a 5-year renewable residency permit. No need to live in Greece, no need to work. For wealthy foreigners, especially from China, Russia, and the Middle East, it was a bargain. Many owned multiple properties but never moved in. By 2023, Greece had issued nearly 9,610 golden visas. Prices in central Athens soared. Entire blocks were bought up, not for living, but for investment portfolios. Meanwhile, locals struggled to rent or buy in their cities. Homes that once went for 150,000 euros are now priced at double or more, out of reach for everyday Greeks. First-time buyers were locked out and renters faced shrinking options. After seeing the consequences of the Golden Visa program, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis introduced a major change in 2024. He raised the minimum investment to 500,000 euros and proposed to increase it to 800,000 euros in high-demand areas like central Athens, Thessaloniki, and the islands in an attempt to protect local housing and cool down the market. But by then, the damage was done. Greece leaned on outside investment to survive, but in doing so, it priced out the very people it was meant to protect. And many people responded in the only way they could, by leaving. Since 2009, over 500,000 Greeks, mostly young and educated, have left the country in search of better opportunities abroad. That's nearly 5% of the population. Doctors, engineers, teachers, all gone. When youth employment rose past 60% and the average wages stuck below 1,100 euros, even the highly educated couldn't afford to build a life at home. Some took underpaid jobs, others stayed with their parents into their 30s, and for many, starting a family was simply out of reach. As a result, today, Greece's birth rate is among the lowest in Europe. The population is shrinking and aging fast. By 2050, 1 in 3 Greeks will be over 65.
The big financial crisis, almost 500,000 of people left. They went to other countries, mostly around Europe and in the States, and they created their families there.
Amid growing public unrest in Greece, the government there is temporarily halting the construction of permanent detention centers for people seeking asylum who are flocking to the country.
I want to turn to Greece now, where the government is facing mounting pressure over a phone tapping scandal. It's alleged that the spyware software called Predator was planted on people's mobile phones, including journalists and the leader of an opposition party.
These Athens residents are mourning the...
And with fewer young people left to support the economy, the cycle of decline risks getting even worse. And for decades, Greece pushed its own people to the edge and then watched as they walked away. And the most heartbreaking part, many of them didn't want to leave, and they just couldn't afford to stay. There are 2 Greeces today, the one you see on postcards, vibrant, sunny, and alive, and the one lived by everyday people, where the paycheck vanishes before the 10th of the month, and dreams of owning a home are just that, dreams. Both exist in the same country, but only one is thriving. So, what do you think? Can Greece still be turned around, or is the damage already done? Should cities exist for the people who live in them, or for the ones who can afford to buy them out? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video changed your perspective, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe.